Killer Innovations Podcast for Sunday, September 25th, 2005. Show number 29, brought to you from Half Moon Bay, California. Hello, and welcome to the Killer Innovations Podcast. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we get started, please keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone, and do not necessarily reflect those of my past, current, or future employers. Well, I'll be leaving tomorrow for New Orleans. I guess I'm one of the fortunate ones. My employer allows any employee to take time with full pay to work for the disaster relief, so I'll be taking off next week, and we'll spend 1 week in New Orleans. I'll be helping to restore both the cellular and the emergency police fire communication infrastructures in New Orleans, assuming that they get the water out. I'll be coming back to San Francisco next Sunday, so I'm not quite sure where the next podcast will be broadcast from. Most likely on Monday when I get back, given that I will probably not have electricity where I'm going. So stay tuned, and next week I'll report what I experienced down in New Orleans firsthand. Also, thanks for the feedback. Keep it coming. You can reach me at podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can always call the feedback line at 703-636-4460, or you can Skype me at Phil_McKinney. I did get one message on the feedback line this week from Michael. He asked me actually not to play it. Don't worry, Michael, you can pay the bribe later for me not playing your message. But Mike actually brought up a good question, which was the difference between software and hardware innovations. In an earlier podcast, I think Michael's a fairly new listener, so he's actually trolling back through all of the other podcasts and trying to catch up. And there was one point in the earlier podcast where I talked about kind of the criteria that I use when I'm looking at innovations that are being presented to me, or the criteria that I use for denoting success. And I talked about kind of the difference between hardware and software as far as margin contribution. You know, something in the neighborhood of a 30% margin on hardware and 70% margin on software would constitute success on a commercial launch. But Michael was asking for a little more detail on software versus hardware innovation. Maybe if there's differences on approach or whatever. So I'm going to hold that when we'll cover that in a future podcast. I'm going to need to do a little bit of research given the details of Michael's question that he left on the feedback line. So stay tuned, and I'll cover that in an upcoming podcast. Another question that we got in an earlier podcast, and it was actually, in a feedback line, and one that I actually played in an earlier podcast, which was innovation styles in different parts of the world. Many people view the U.S. as being highly innovative. There are other countries such as Japan, Korea, Australia, and other countries that are viewed as being highly innovative. What constitutes an innovative culture from the standpoint of countries, and what are the different styles of innovation used? So that's also one that I'm continuing to do research on, and we'll include that in a future podcast. So stay tuned. Keep the questions coming. You can either email them to me, or you can leave them on the voicemail feedback line. If you leave me a message on the feedback line, I'll play it in a future podcast. So feel free to do that. Segment 1, today we're going to talk about overcoming objections. You know, one of the challenges that we all face is really the challenge of overcoming, the constant objections or challenges that we get from people when we first present our ideas. It tends to be very easy for the person who has not come up with the idea to be negative to whatever innovation or brainstorm or eureka moment that you've had. And there's actually a lot of famous ones that you can think about. H.M. Warner, who eventually went on to create what is now Warner Brothers Studios. In the early days before there were talking movies, we all had the silent movies. And when talking first came about, Warner was quoted as saying, who the hell wants to hear actors talk? Nowadays, I don't think we could think of going to a movie and listen and watching the lips move and not hearing the dialogue. The famous one from Western Union that says, this telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us. And that was Western Union's internal memo, 1876, declining to acquire the patents to what is now known as the telephone. Or the quote that says, airplanes are interesting toys, but of no military value. And this was a quote from French Marshal Ferdinand Foch, professor of strategy. It was an advisor to the French government on military strategy. So again, the kind of, if you go through them all, whether it's the Thomas Watson, I think there's a world market of maybe 5 computers, or the engineers at IBM's Advanced Computing Systems division asking for a comment on the invention of the microchip in 1968. Their quote was, but, what is it good for? So there are a lot of history where famous inventions that if we look at them today and look back over time, we think of them as just being obvious inventions, whether that be the telephone, movies, airplanes, computers, whatever the case might be. But at the time, the people coming up with those ideas had to face a lot of the negative reactions. And every great inventor has had to overcome the negative reactions from others. Some of these comments have come from thought leaders, which can really crush your motivation. And that's why a lot of us that are in the think of us as being idea generators or innovators, the creative types, tend to be somewhat a little bit shy about sharing the ideas that we're working on for fear of the negative reaction. So, so what's the purpose of really this segment? I wanted to share with you at least some of the tricks that I use when I'm working on ideas and I'm getting ready to present them or roll them out, to kind of protect myself from the negative comments that invariably always come. One is to find a community. Find a group of individuals, whether that's inside your company or outside your company, people who have that creative bent, people who have over time proven themselves to be supportive of what you're working on, interested in your ideas, and people that can help pump up your passion for what it is you're working on. And in many cases, finding this network can be a little difficult. That's one of the reasons why I've created the Killer Innovation community site. So if you haven't visited, go to killerinnovations.com and click on the KI community button. It's an area where you can meet up with other individuals, toss out ideas, get feedback, and maybe find some individuals in that community who are like-minded, who you can use who you can network with. And that networking is critical. It's one, teaching you how to react to other people's ideas. Even today, I have to catch myself about not being negative towards another person's ideas. And given that I look at literally thousands and thousands of ideas and innovations every year in my day-to-day job, I have to catch myself. I have to not go with the immediate reaction. And that immediate reaction tends to be based on our history, based on our own, experiences, based on, we tried that once before and it didn't work. And that is kind of the reaction that we all fight against when we hear it. Typically management comes down when someone comes up with a new creative idea, with the immediate negative response of saying, nope, we're not going to do that. We've already done it. It doesn't work. I have 25 years experience. I can tell you right now, we shouldn't waste our time. And those all tend to be the easy outs. It's very easy to say no. It's very difficult to say yes. So to overcome these negatives, find a community, network with them. And then 3, look at the negative comments as things to overcome. Sometimes the negative reaction is purely emotional. It can be political. But the key here is that there's a negative reaction for a reason. So don't take it personal and look at the negative reaction or look at the negative comment as being something that you need to overcome. And then 4th, and the most important thing, find your own way to keep your passion. Keep your passion about the area that you're working in. about the technologies, about what you work on. In my case, my passion, I keep it, going through interactions outside of my company, traveling, meeting with customers. In a previous podcast, I shared what I had done in Korea with regards to going down to Busan and spending a day with 15 to 21-year-olds who are big in the gaming space, and just getting their energy and their passion. Recently, I was invited by Mike Berman, who's the CTO for the Art Center College of Design, to spend a day down in Pasadena at the university, interacting with students on the last day of their semester, where the students get to present their projects. Let me tell you, it's hard to leave going into one of those runs, come out of there without being excited, without being energized, without being passionate about the areas that you're working on. So you need to go find whatever it is that energizes you, whether that's finding people that you can interact with, finding someone that you look up to, a mentor of some kind, and interacting with them and getting their inputs and thoughts, people that are encouraging to you. Or in my case, I tend to find it working with students, working in with younger generations, where these new students coming into the industry, or students who are still in college, who are very passionate, very high energy. They sometimes may come across as being a little rough, maybe not have the right the communication skills to express what it is they're working on, but obviously their energy level will carry them forward. So again, to overcome objections, find a community of like-minded people who are supportive of the work that you're doing. Network, extend your network out, find others who are working in similar areas. Third, look at the negative comments as something that you need to overcome. And fourth, find your own way to keep your passion, whatever that might be. Segment 2, weak signals. Normally I would be presenting a story that highlights an innovator. In previous podcasts, we've talked about Black & Decker, J.W. Marriott, LL Bean. Since I've been on the road for 3 weeks straight, and I have another 4 weeks before I get to go home, I'm a little behind in my writing and my research. So this week, we're going to continue on the normal path of weak signals. And this week's weak signal, we're going to talk about the trend that's emerging where the MFA is replacing the MBA. Now, for those of us who've been in the industry for 10 plus years, the MBA was kind of the ultimate holy grail. Everybody wanted to go back to business school, whether you were a technologist by training or some other field, and to get that MBA, to take that next step on your career path. Well, what we're seeing now is given the shift that's occurring from the information age, which is kind of fading into the sunset, and the new emergence of what we call the conceptual age, an emerging world where creative, empathic types are going to be the big winners. In that case, the MFA, or the Masters of Fine Arts, is quickly becoming the new MBA. It seems that creativity is in high demand. I just look at the number of subscribers listening to this podcast. It's growing at a phenomenal rate. The listener base is growing on a global scale. The amount of emails and questions I get. There's a lot of people who recognize that it's no longer about just the skill set you've learned, but your ability to apply it and use not just your left side, but also your right side of your brain. So creativity is growing in its demand. You're finding leading businesses are not just hiring MBAs, but are looking for diversity in their management teams with a variety of skills. So not everybody will have, their engineering degree from MIT and their MBA from Kellogg School at Northwestern. You're going to find people with a variety of skill sets, some people with degrees, and even some people without degrees. It's going to be that diversity that is going to become the real DNA for future businesses. Some would argue, particularly people who are in the academic field and training up these creative types, that the future is going to belong to the artists, to the inventors, to the designers, to the storytellers. Those people who can really paint the big picture, who can see how all of the disciplines are going to come together to deliver those new and compelling kinds of user experiences. And let's face it, those people have not really reaped the fine rewards or the salaries or even the executive level positions. And there's this strong belief that that is going to change, that the future leaders of major businesses are not going to be just the spreadsheet jockeys and the people who come from finance or sales, but it is going to be the creative types, people who can see across multiple disciplines how to build those teams, how to extract the real creative energy from each and every team member to create those next great killer innovations. And if you think about what the economy really is going to need, the future economy is going to require really this integration of both left brain logic and this right brain creativity. And therefore management, typically we think of middle managers as really just being an extension of HR, organizing teams, measuring results, giving performance reviews. The new skill for management is really going to be those people who can assemble the right diversity of teams, the right kind of creativity skills, the right kind of people that both have the logic left brain and the creativity right brain. And for those people who really can have both skill sets, who can be both technical or logical on the left brain, and who can at the same time extract or leverage their right brain activities, are going to really be in high demand, are going to be the big winners both in their current careers but also in their ability to have impact on their business. And just as a proof point here, when you're looking at the makeups of, let's say, partners at McKinsey, McKinsey being kind of the premier corporate strategy firm in the world, particularly given the hourly rate that they charge. In 1993, 61% of the management consultants at McKinsey had MBA degrees. Less than a decade later, it was down to 43%. So an MBA is not an automatic ticket to the big time. And in many cases, people have found that MBAs may be slightly over-regimented in the way they think, and therefore have lost that ability to tap into the creativity side of the business. And therefore, what businesses are really looking for is what we call the whole-minded aptitude. The ability, again, to leverage both the left brain logic and the right brain creativity. A book that I would recommend, if you're not familiar with it, is a book by Daniel Pink called A Whole New Mind, Moving from the Information Age to the Conceptual Age. Pink was formerly the speechwriter for Al Gore. He's got a number of other books out there. In this case, this book is pretty heavily researched. It has some great examples. It is very insightful in Pink's view of the impact on the economy and what does it really mean. And so therefore, I would highly recommend it again. A Whole New Mind, Moving from the Information Age to the Conceptual Age by Daniel Pink, put out by Riverhead Books. It's about 250 pages or so. It is a great read. Now, the other day, while I was sitting here in Half Moon Bay, I was watching Thomas Friedman's speech. And Friedman is a reporter for the New York Times. He's got his most recent book, which is on the New York Times bestseller list, on The World is Flat, and basically talking about globalism. And Friedman made the point in his own book and in the speech that I was watching on TV the other night about the fact that there's no such thing as an American job or an Australian job or a UK job. There is just this thing called a job. And that job is going to get done wherever in the world his people are best skilled and at the best value for what that skill is. And his point is that typical information age jobs are going to move around and have very little friction in the economy to be moved anywhere, such as in India, China, or Eastern Europe, which is quickly becoming the new hotspot for outsourcing. And really, it's going to be this new creative economy where the differentiation is going to happen between developed worlds and undeveloped worlds. So again, the point here is that this concept of the MFA, the Masters of Fine Arts, becoming the replacement for the MBA, I don't know if it's going to be quite that extreme, but what you are seeing is those people who can leverage both the left brain logic and the right brain creative are going to be the big winners as the economy continues to shift. Moving on to segment 3, the killer question of the week. For those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a while know that I do track a number of specific industry segments, one of them being gaming. And when I sat back and really thought about the gaming market and what really makes it so attractive, it is the fact that you have a passionate customer base that is willing to devote enormous amount of times of their personal life and sacrificing in other areas in order to spend the time playing these games. So, this week's killer question is, what would be necessary to appeal to those who use this product or service in enormous quantities or to the exclusion of other normal life activities? Again, what would be necessary to appeal to those who would use this product in enormous quantities or to the exclusion of other normal life activities? When you think about normal life activities, it's if you're a student, it's school. If you're out of school, it's work, food, relaxation with your family, etc. What would you be willing to give up in order to have this experience, to use this kind of product or service? Gaming is an obvious one that I use to really trigger the thoughts around this question. And when you think about it today, the gaming market this year in 2005 is going to exceed the total revenue for DVDs on a worldwide basis. So we're talking about something that is just absolutely massive. And recently, there was an article in the paper with regards to what they called the cyber games. And this is the U.S. version of pro gamers. 183 young men and a single woman, aged 15 to 28, competed. And really, they reviewed it as being the Olympics for gaming. And that's not the interesting point. Here you have 184 people competing. 4,000 fans showed up for the 3-day event to watch the players compete in 8 different games. And when they talked to some of the young gamers, the gamers said that, quote, "I would much rather watch a really good game of StarCraft or Counter-Strike than watch something like football." So when you think about the current existing markets of watching football or baseball or hockey, and this younger generation willing to say that they would much rather either go to an event or watch it at home on broadband to watch a pro gamer than to watch sports, you clearly see the shift where people are going to start moving that disposable income away from what we traditionally view as potentially relaxation activities and going into new areas. Now, in this case, the first prize was $5,000. Not a big amount of money. Nothing compared to what we see in Asia Pacific, like in Korea and other places where the prize money is much, much larger. But in this case, the first place not only got the $5,000, but they also got a trip to the World Cyber Games in Singapore. Interestingly enough, the team that won both the Counter-Strike and the Halo 2 competition is the same team, or Team 3D. Now, this team was put together by a 22-year-old, I want to say kid. He's a kid in my category, given he's about the same age as my oldest daughter. Put together a team of students and professionals that he knew that were really good in gamers. They secured sponsors. Their sponsors include Intel and the graphics company NVIDIA. And Team 3D pays some of its players a regular living stipend so that they can practice and play tournaments full time. So you think about a market or an industry where you're willing to give up enormous quantities or exclusive other life activities in order to do something. gaming is one choice. Other areas are things like golf, or really any kind of a hobby where you're willing to give up something else in order to spend the money and the time to go do something. Vacations. I know people who love to do exotic vacations, and they're willing to sacrifice other parts of their lives in order to go do those kinds of luxury or exotic vacations. Luxury cars. There's a lot of areas. So the key here is to find that next killer innovation. What would be necessary to appeal to those who use this product or service in enormous quantities or to the exclusion of other normal life's activities? And with that, we're going to wrap up. We're actually going to come in a couple minutes early on this podcast as I'm trying to pack up tonight to leave for New Orleans tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Please keep the feedback coming. The email volume has dropped here slightly in the last week or so. So again, feel free to drop me an email at podcast@killerinnovations.com. Or as always, you can call me on the feedback line, 703-636-4460. Or you can Skype me at Phil_McKinney. I would encourage you to visit the KI community site, participate in the conversation, generate your own ideas, respond to the comments and things that are on that site. It's really, the community is there for you, the listeners, to be able to get to plug in, find others that are like-minded, and be able to encourage each other. Stay subscribed and pass the word to others for others to subscribe, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.